Thanks for joining us on this webinar. We are going to be talking about investing in commercial real estate. I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about who we are. So my name is Nicheole Amundsen, and I've been a real estate investor for about 20 years. I've been doing commercial for the last 16, and we have properties in 11 states. What James and I buy are apartment buildings, manufactured housing, communities, or sometimes known as mobile home parks, and self-storage properties. We also buy, sell, and create notes. We own several franchises, and I'm doing some international investing in Panama and Uruguay. So I started in residential real estate in 1998, so this is my 20th year. Bought my first house in June of 98, and that first house just paid off last month. So I have one house that's free and clear after 20 years of mortgage. It took me about 4 years to figure out in residential that the house was rented or it wasn't. It was a 0 or a 1. And when it was a 0, when it was empty, I could lose my entire profit for the entire year by having to pay 1 or 2 mortgage payments. So I started looking in about 16 years ago at some commercial. And the first property I bought was an 8-unit in Idaho. It's where I'm originally from. I'm from Idaho, from the Pacific Northwest. And so it was kind of a natural for me. Let me kind of move on a little bit. My partner, James Ray, has been a high-end residential rehabber for, about the last 4 or 5 years, and he owns several rentals. He's a partner in some stuff we own together. And he's also an executive coach and executive recruiter. So one of the first things to talk about a little bit is to just talk a little bit, is commercial actually for you? I want to talk just a little bit about the upside and then some of the downsides for commercial. Commercial being 5 units or more, or something that is only used for income purposes, income producing purposes. So the upside, some of the upsides to commercial real estate is it really is a way to build long-term wealth. It is not a way, conversely, to have a lot of cash flow immediately. Commercial real estate in general does not generate enough cash flow for you to be able to retire after the purchase of your first property, no matter what people tell you. The good news is that it's more units under one roof, and it's about the same amount of work to buy 50 units as it is to buy 4. The downside is residential is easier to get loans on. And there are many more protections if you are buying residential real estate. There's a lot of consumer protections out there that are not that don't work in commercial. Sellers in commercial real estate are much more sophisticated. So most of the time they're selling through a broker or some other means. They know what their properties are worth, and that's what they're going to go for. That's also an upside, and it's also a downside. So the upside is you are typically dealing with somebody who knows what their property is worth and knows what you're going to need to be able to do due diligence. The downside is that you are going to have a harder time getting those deals you can in residential where somebody's going to sell you their property at 65% of the value. In commercial, we typically get others to do most of the work. I got to tell you, having properties in 11 states, I do not manage any of my properties. We have property managers. And so that is part of your analysis that we'll talk about at a later time for calculating in what you have to pay a property manager and on-site staff. The downside, one of the downsides is if you make a mistake in how you're assessing the property and what you're paying for it, it can be very expensive. And that's one of the reasons to get to know this investment space, to learn it, and to be able to have somebody to ask questions of, because mistakes can be very expensive. Commercial real estate is good for holding long term, for getting appreciation, and if you're ready to buy something larger, 1031 exchange it and move it into a larger property. So you're not taking profits out, you're just moving that money to a larger property. It's also harder to find good deals, particularly right now in the commercial space. People are selling properties at, to me, a lot of them don't make a lot of sense to buy them. So let's kind of move on to the next slide. So there's a lot of things that fit under the commercial real estate umbrella. In general, it's 5 units or more is considered commercial. Now I'm talking multifamily right now. So apartment buildings, mobile home parks fit under the multifamily umbrella. What I do want to do is go over the general types of commercial, so you can kind of get a sense. This is a very broad area. And I'm going to be the first one to admit I don't know a lot about other than what we buy. But let me tell you just a couple of things about the different kinds of commercial. In office, there are typically 2 types. There are those that are in the central business district, and B, there are those in the suburban, and then typically medical buildings fit into the general office type too. Industrial covers a big waterfront, from heavy manufacturing, large manufacturing. Those buildings are very hard to reconfigure, and it can get very expensive very quickly. Light assembly, where you typically don't have this huge machinery, so it's easier to reconfigure. Flex warehouses are something that you're seeing a lot of in the last 5 to 10 years. And they are typically a mix of industrial and office, and they're fairly easy to be reconfigured. You have bulk warehouses, which are the big ones, like you would see an Amazon or a Walmart or something like that, renting out. And they're typically from 50,000 to 1 million square feet. We don't do anything with that. The next area is retail, and that also covers a lot of different kinds of properties, from strip centers to community retail centers, which are typically 150 to 350,000 square feet. You have the power centers, which are the large big box retailers. And in those centers, you typically have out parcels. And out parcels, if you think of a lot of the malls, you have the big mall, and then in that same space, you may have a McDonald's, or you may have a gas station, and those are typically called out parcels. They are part of the larger, but they're not attached. You have regional malls where parcels are set aside and apart for things like fast food restaurants, etc. Commercial real estate also covers multifamily, and that's basically we buy in this area, so you see it's highlighted. Those are garden apartments, mid-rise apartments, high-rise apartments, mobile home communities. They're typically where people live. Hotels are a type of commercial. You have full service, limited service, motels, extended stay. You have land. Some land is going to be under the commercial, and some you're going to find it under residential. In land, you typically have things that are allocated as a greenfield land, meaning that it's undeveloped, it's probably never been developed. It's green, you are probably the first one to build on it. Infill land. So those are typically in cities, in towns, and you will see a vacant lot that can be developed, and those are called infills. Cities like Portland and Boulder, Colorado, are actively working to fill in infill land, to build on infill land before they start moving out and developing greenfield. And you're seeing more and more cities that are beginning to do that. Some of them may have had a house on it in the past and it's now vacant. And then you have brownfield. And those are generally things that are environmentally impaired. So it used to be a gas station on it, and there's nothing there now. So those are things where there can be gas, where there can be land that has some issues with it. Typically, I stay away from brownfield. And then you have special purpose, which are typically, those things are like self-storage, which we buy, car washes, marinas, bowling alleys, funeral homes, nursing homes, churches, all those kinds of things. These, what I want to point out here is you also see these listed for sale by business brokers. So it's not just real estate brokers. So if you're looking to buy any of these, you also need to go find business brokers to see what they may be able to have listed. And frequently, if they are listed with a business broker, they are not listed with a real estate broker, and vice versa.